The summer I turned 10, the old house by the river wore a patient, honey-coloured light, as if it were listening for something, stepwise, soft, inevitable to arrive. I can still smell that light, a scent of rain-warmed wood, and the faint tang of river mud that clung to our clothes even after we came indoors. It's strange how a memory can settle like dust on a shelf and stay there even when you think you've swept it away. The house had a way of listening. And we learned to speak carefully, to say enough to be heard, but not so much that we woke something sleeping in the walls. Her name was Mara, my cousin in all but blood. A laugh like a shell popping open on a quiet afternoon, and a fearless sort of reckless that felt almost saintly to a child's eyes. We spent that summer in the half-light between the room that slept with the river outside and the attic above, where the house kept its breath, slow and thick as wool. The attic was a cabinet of fancies, old trunks, a language of hinges that sighed when opened, moth-winged photographs that glowed faintly in the corners if you kept quiet enough to listen. On the longest day of the year, we performed a little ritual, a child's map drawn in the air with our fingers, and a circle traced in the dust on the floor. The circle was not to keep dangerous things out, but to remind ourselves that some things could be kept inside, where the house could tend them. We laid a small shell, washed grey with the river, in the centre, and spoke the names of the people we missed, as if memory could be coaxed to return if we only whispered in the right place. Mara and I whispered with a hush that could sound like prayer or like a dare, and our voices seemed to thread themselves through the dust and through the thin heat that drifted down the stairway. That summer, Mara kept a mercury kind of speed in her bones, ran along the bank until the river itself seemed to lean in closer to hear her, chased dragonflies for sport, and carved a map of the island of the old willow tree in the dirt beneath the attic window, where the light pulled thick and patient. Her laughter carried through the sunlit air, and even the old house seemed to listen differently when she spoke. It was as if the walls did not quite house our bodies, but kept our voices safe, somewhere near the ceiling, where the old plaster could drink them in and keep them if it must. And then the river took her. We were by the water, Mara and I, the summer turning the world the colour of coins. A storm gathered, as if the sky were learning a new language and testing its vowels. We stood on the bank, Mara pointing toward a glint of metal that had wedged itself in a tangle of reeds, a thing she believed could be a treasure or a map, or a dare from some old god who liked the taste of daring children. The river's voice grew loud and certain, and in a moment of bright confusion, Mara moved toward it as if it would answer a question we hadn't known to ask. A current slid along the bank and wrapped itself around her ankles, and then she was gone, a flash of hair and laughter, sucked away into the water and the rain and the river's patient mouth. We searched for hours as the storm broke open above the town, washing the house, washing the yard, washing the river clean until it shone like a coin you'd found in a pocket you forgot you owned. The house seemed to swell with a deep, damp breath, a long sigh that rose from the cellar stairs and wrapped itself around the attic's ladder. When Mara did not return, the attic's lanterns, those living lamps that always burned a little dimmer in the memory, gave us a final, very old-looking glow, and that was all. The river had taken what we had not known we were giving away. The house, which had listened to us with a patient patience that could have been sorrow, did something quiet and terrible then. It began to remember Mara for us. Not merely the way she looked or the sound of her laughter, but the texture of her presence, the feel of her breath on your ear, the way a second of stillness could ripple through the room as if someone invisible pressed a finger to a pane of glass and whispered, "I am here." Time keeps memory alive in odd places. The attic, which had slept in dust all those years, woke up everywhere Mara had touched it. The shell's dull edge acquired a shine that wasn't from the river's water, but from some other. Older light the house kept for guests, it refuses to forget. The circle drawn in dust never disappeared again. It was as if the wall itself remembered. And every night after Mara's disappearance, it traced the circle in its own way. Light spills along the floor, a thread of glow you could almost pluck from the air and hold between your thumb and forefinger. I grew older, and the river's memory filled out into the town's memory. And then I left the house for a life that carried with it the weight of all summers past. The old house did not forget me, though I forgot it sometimes in favour of the world's louder rooms. But the longer I lived, the more the world's loudness sounded like a cough behind a curtain, a sudden movement you tell yourself wasn't there. And the house remained, patient as a grandmother's watchful eye, waiting to be spoken to again. Now I am old, and the house is taller on the inside than the outside remembered it to be. Now I sit by a window that overlooks the same river I once stood by with Mara on the longest day. The air comes heavy with the memory of rain that never quite stops, and a light that is never exactly the sun's. And I am learning to listen in a different way. Not with hearing, but with the way a place remembers what you do not tell it. The circle in the dust reappears to me sometimes, not as dust, but as a suggestion in air, as if the house itself is showing me where the floor once cried. In the night, a soft, sighing sound moves along the corridor. An old wind in a house has a language of its own, and this wind sounds like a voice saying a name I once spoke when Mara was still with me. The attic door, which I learned to fear in the way a child fears a thundercloud, sometimes stands slightly ajar, just enough to catch a glimpse of a lamp that no longer matches the room set. Mara, I tell myself, is not here. And then the attic gives me a present I did not know I was still owed. A corridor of air that opens into a small chamber behind the bookcase. A place I did not know existed. A truth rather than a room. The bookcase yields slowly, giving way to a narrow passage, like a throat that opens for a word it has waited a lifetime to hear. It leads to a little room, dim and still, where a desk stands under a window that looks out over the river. And on that desk rests a single thing Mara would have loved, an old photograph, sepia pale, of a girl with Mara's hair and Mara's smile. But the eyes in that photo do not belong to Mara's face alone. They look older and younger at once, as if time itself wore Mara like a coat